Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the very first episode of the Point One podcast. We are your hosts. My name is Chris Carlos, and for the next 6 or so episodes, I'll be speaking to you with my best friend, Mr. Brendan Lee. Brendan, why don't you get us underway?
Hi guys, so over the next few weeks we're going to try and introduce you to some key concepts that we think will help elevate you from the top 10% to the top 1% of performers, so going from being just good to being exceptionally good. And we're going to have a few practical examples, and we're going to have a few steps that are going to help get you there. So Chris, over to you, man.
Yeah. So, Brendan, why do you think that we've come across the need for this podcast? A bit of background maybe for the listeners. You and I, for a long time now, have been involved in kind of the self-help background of building social circles, of building business plans, social interaction, and why have we come across this idea where we've established a gap in the market or a unique selling point for our podcast that we think would benefit us, our friends, and maybe other listeners out there?
I think the biggest thing was we're two guys who have been striving and doing a lot of hard work in the last few years ourselves, and we've listened to a lot of podcasts and read a lot of books and tried to help ourselves. And what we've come across is that a lot of the time self-help is very good for people who are at the bottom of the rung. It's a bit like a person who's 20 stone overweight. It's very easy for them to lose the weight to just drop off, but eventually when you get in good shape, it's very hard to get in better shape.
Like body fat.
So, yeah, exactly. I mean, if
you
you're
know all about that.
Yeah. So if you're at 20% body fat, it's very easy to get down to 15. It's very difficult to get down from 15 to 10, and it's even more difficult to get down from 10 to 5%.
For sure.
You know what I mean? So we're looking at what turns a guy who's ordinary into a guy who's extraordinary. And essentially, when we've looked at a lot of podcasts, they've been centering on how to get good or how just to achieve some level of success. And that's every sort of podcast. I mean, professional podcast help you in your life. And I think that's what a lot of self-help caters to. And it's very woo-woo. And we were kind of looking at it and thinking to ourselves, there's a lot of practical stuff that's not being said here that needs to be said.
Sure.
And I think a big example of that recently has been like Conor McGregor. So me and Chris were talking about it and sort of saying, I'm sure a lot of the listeners are familiar with a book. It's called The Secret. And the idea behind that is essentially if you focus hard enough, you'll achieve what you think about. And Conor McGregor has sort of said this stuff, and I would presume most listeners would be aware of who Conor McGregor is, but if not, he's the first man. He was the double weight champion in the UFC simultaneously at featherweight and lightweight. Highly successful individual. So this guy's a huge proponent of The Secret and this idea that if you believe in something, it'll come true. But at the same time, he's also a huge proponent of hard work, which I'm sure Chris agrees is the main reason that he's successful.
Yeah, and that's really what we're distilling the point of this podcast from. When Brendan talks about woo-woo, I found when I was starting out on the path of self-development and finding your hustle, there's a whirlpool out there of self-development, of self-help. It's become a 21st century problem where you sit and you read and read and read and read and read, but you don't apply anything. Mm-hmm. So the point of the next few weeks is giving you practical tips from each podcast, something that you can do, take away from the podcast, go out and do, and see the impact of it. Yeah. And bringing it back to the Conor McGregor point, visualization is huge. You have to visualize success, but let's not kid ourselves. Conor McGregor wasn't sitting on the dole in Dublin for 10 years thinking about how he was going to get success while his girlfriend was making him bacon sandwiches. The idea of visualization is great, but it's the application of visualization that's the important part.
I think there's a lot of people out there who are sitting thinking of mansions, but they're not working towards the mansion in any practical step. No, you've got to be practical and you've got to take action. I mean, if you were to take anything away from everything that you've read and everything that you've listened to, the
Yeah.
main principle is to take action and to work hard.
Yeah.
Because unless you take that first initial step, which is usually the hardest one,
Yeah.
you're not going to achieve any sort of success. And that's it. I mean, in order to do anything, you're going to have to take that risk and you're going to have to make yourself vulnerable, but it's going to be worth it.
Yeah, 100%. And the point of our podcast as well is bringing you beyond that, because with the point one podcast, we want to look at what brings people into that 0.1%. And
Yeah.
I've said before, you know, the things that people think about, you know, is it talent or is it commitment or is it hard work? We're going to really distill each of those topics down, and we're going to look at 5 or 6 critical things that will carry you from being good to great to the top 2 or 3 in your field.
I think that's definitely so. Like when we were talking about Conor McGregor, there we were kind of getting into it a bit about this idea of actually, this is a guy who's worked ridiculously hard. So one of his quotes himself is about the idea of you've got people say to him, you must be very naturally talented, and he says no, it's all to do with hard work. He doesn't believe in anything such as talent. He just believes it's all hard work. Now, I personally believe Conor McGregor is a ridiculously talented individual, but at the end of the day, the idea that applying hard work will bear bigger fruit is huge, and it's huge in everything. Because for every ridiculously talented guy, the guy who works harder is going to be more successful.
Yeah, 100%.
Because no matter how talented you are, if you don't apply the work, you're not going to be successful. So the point of the Point One podcast is essentially going to come down to hard work, and I think that's a thing that a lot of self-help doesn't like to fess up to, this idea that, look guys, you're going to have to work hard in order to be successful.
Yeah. I mean, self-help, as we both know, we've read hundreds of books on the topic, and we've seen hundreds of professional interactions. Everybody knows about the grind, you know, get your grind on, work. But from what I've seen personally, and I've worked with some, you know, super successful people, and the thing about talent is, I think people use it as a limiting step. So
Yeah, definitely.
you can use it as a limiting step before you've reached your grind, you know, when you're at home and you haven't perhaps got a job, you're struggling to find a house, you're struggling to, you know, make things happen in your life, which I think the majority of self-help targets already.
Yeah.
You know, so that's the first barrier to success. People say, I haven't had the opportunity, so I can't get a job, can't find a wife, can't find a house. But the second and more surreptitious and second barrier to success, I think, comes with a lot of people that we see in our peers, you know, people who are good, who are working hard, but can't get to that level wwhere they are the best in the organisation, where they're taking the next step, and you fall back into the old excuse that, oh, it's talent, you know, I'm working hard, you know, I've achieved some success, but I'm not naturally talented, so I can't be the best.
Yeah.
And that's untrue. For the vast bulk of people I've seen who've been the best in their field, they're the best because of obsession, not because of talent. A few people are naturally talented, but the obsessive work ethic of the people at the top, talent really doesn't come into it that much. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, if you look at any field, the people who are the hardest workers are the people who rise to the top.
Yeah.
And it's just a fact of life. I mean, if you want to be successful, you're going to have to work hard. And as I was saying earlier, it's a fact of self-help. A lot of them don't like to fess up to this fact that you're going to have to put in the work.
Yeah.
And it's an idea that in order to be, me and Chris both thought that the main thing that was missing, and that's why we started this podcast, was this idea of people getting into the top 1%, is that in order to do so, you have to put in work above and beyond.
Mm-hmm.
And we also looked at a few other key concepts that we're going to look over the next few weeks, but this is sort of the one we want to talk about here to kick things off.
Yeah.
I don't know, any other ideas, Chris, about this idea of talent versus skill versus hard work versus...
Yeah, I mean, it is you have to get past the point of using this as an excuse. You know, talent, some people are talented, some people aren't, but everybody has a level of talent that you can exploit. And certainly for a lot of our listeners, the thing is, we're not looking at individual skills. We're not saying you have to be Conor McGregor with the skill of UFC. Most people working in business, working in finance, working in medicine, your talents are intertwinable and interchangeable. So by working at each of those talent bases, you can really pump yourself up into a level far beyond what your individual talents would cater for you to be.
I think excuses can be very insidious as well. I mean, if you start letting yourself make excuses, it's not long before you're making excuses for everything. So,
total responsibility.
Yeah, that's another major point. I mean, when you distill a lot of these self-help gurus down to the main points that they talk about, and you take out the waffle, a lot of it is essentially taking responsibility for your own actions, working hard, and being committed. I mean, and I think personally a massive one is that idea of taking responsibility, this principle that you don't give yourself excuses. So anything that's within your sphere of influence, if you take responsibility for that and do not give yourself an excuse as to why you didn't achieve it. So a lot of people like in work, they like to go, that person got the promotion because they had this I didn't have, instead of looking at why they don't have that attribute, or instead of looking at what could I have done to overcome that deficiency and have posed something that had a greater strength to it. Something, you agree?
Totally agree. And the thing about it is as well, if you look at what you can do physically, rather than why you think someone got a job or you think someone got a better role than you, if you look at what you can do to change, that's something you have an effect over. You saying, this person got the job because their dad's a barrister, or their dad is a chief executive of another company, you have no influence over that. So take the impact of what they achieved, assess why they did it, and assess how you can change to approach that goal. And that's really what the podcast is going to focus on over the next 6 or 7 weeks. We're going to look at key practical steps. I'm going to address each concept. We're going to really distill and wear each concept down to a level that current self-development doesn't bring you to. So I think that's a good summary of what we're hoping to achieve over the next few weeks. Is there anything else you want to add, Brendan, before we wrap up?
Yeah, I mean, so over the next, like Chris was saying, 6 to 7 weeks, that's kind of the idea. We're going to try and take you into this top 1% in terms of like professional. And then the podcast is going to continue. After that point, we're going to look at other principles and other facets of life. But really, we're going to try and take this step by step. And the first 6 sort of weeks is going to concentrate on professional life and key facets that we think we can draw out that'll make you better. We're going to try and keep them short because we've kind of found that a lot of these things tend to meander, get caught up in the waffle that we really don't want to get involved in. We want to be to the point and draw out practical steps. And to that end, we're going to open ourselves up to questions. We're going to open ourselves up to criticism. So we'll have our Facebook page, our Twitter page, our email address, and our Instagram. And we're going to allow you guys to get interactive with us and share any criticisms you have there.
Okay, thanks for tuning in, guys. Appreciate you taking the time. We'll see you next week with more practical advice about how you get to the 0.1% of whatever you want to achieve. Thank you.
See you then, guys. Bye.